She thought he was just another barista. What she didn't expect was that he owned the entire company. And somehow he fell for the most chaotic woman in the building. Before we jump in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Now enjoy the story. If clumsiness were a competitive sport, Elena would have been a 3-time gold medalist. This morning? Disaster from the start. Her alarm never rang, her bus broke down halfway to work, and to top it off, some intern in the elevator hit all the buttons like they were auditioning for a video game tournament. She charged down the polished halls of Whitmore Global Solutions like she was fleeing a fire, purse slipping off her shoulder, holding an empty coffee cup like a trophy of defeat. She bolted into Bean & Company, the company cafe, scanning the room in desperation. No baristas in sight. But there, near the counter, stood a tall guy in a black hoodie and jeans, arms crossed, looking entirely too calm. A new hire, she assumed. "Hey, you," Elena called out, waving her hand dramatically. The man turned, brows raised. "Me? Of course you. You're literally the only one here." She sighed. "Look, I get it's your first day, but time is coffee and I'm seconds from a caffeine meltdown. Double espresso, no sugar, extra foam. Bring it to my desk in 20. Got it?" He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "Wait, what? You heard me, newbie. Move it," she snapped, patting him on the shoulder before storming out. The man blinked in disbelief, then laughed softly. The meeting that followed? A complete disaster. First, Elena tripped over the threshold, slammed her knee against the conference table, and tried to turn it into a cool dance move. Then she yawned loudly right when Mr. Miranda asked about quarterly objectives. To make things worse, when he requested the latest performance report, she realized her flash drive was still at home, probably chilling next to her uneaten breakfast. "Mr. Miranda shot her a glare that could have frozen lava. "We'll need to reevaluate the team," he muttered under his breath. Crushed, Elena dragged herself back to Bean & Company, hoping for at least a proper coffee to salvage what was left of her pride. And there he was, the new guy in the hoodie, holding a steaming cup. Finally, something going right today. Without hesitation, she grabbed the cup and took a big, dramatic sip and immediately spit it back out. "What is this?" she gasped. The man, entirely unfazed, replied, "Black coffee." She stared at the cup like it had personally betrayed her. "Where's the foam?" "The extra foam." He tilted his head. "Didn't realize it was a matter of life or death." "Oh, so now you're funny, rookie? Listen, if you want to keep your job, learn the basics." He raised an eyebrow. "Keep my job." "That's right. Now say it with me. Double espresso, no sugar, extra foam." He smirked. "Extra foam. See? That wasn't so hard. Now go make it before I talk to your manager." Dead silence. The few employees nearby froze, holding their breath. That's when Elena noticed something strange. Why was everyone staring at her? And why was that guy at the next table filming? "What?" she asked, frowning. Then a familiar voice cut through the tension. "Elena." She turned and froze. Standing there was Mr. Miranda, her boss, looking like he was about to pass out. "What now?" she sighed. Mr. Miranda swallowed hard and glanced toward the man in the hoodie. Then he whispered, like the name itself might summon thunder. "You just gave orders to Mr. Garrett Whitmore." Elena blinked. "Who?" "The CEO of this company." She turned back to the man, the supposed newbie, now wearing a smug little grin. You're the CEO?" He crossed his arms. "That's right." The silence in the cafe became deafening. Every drop of blood drained from Elena's face. She forced an awkward smile. "So, no hard feelings, right?" Garrett tilted his head. "That depends. Should I still bring you that double espresso before you file a complaint?" Her brain short-circuited. Panic mode activated. She turned to make a run for it but didn't see the table in front of her. She slammed right into it, sending her purse flying, her empty coffee cup tumbling, and an innocent employee's muffin soaring through the air. The entire room stared. Then Garrett let out a deep, amused laugh. Not a polite chuckle. A full-bodied, "this is the best thing I've seen all week" kind of laugh. Still sprawled on the floor, Elena scrambled to pick up her things, cheeks flaming. "This is going to be fun," Garrett said, almost to himself. And in that moment, Elena knew her life was officially spiraling out of control. Later that day, she found herself seated in the back corner of the executive meeting room, trying to disappear. Her posture was straight, hands folded in her lap, blonde hair tucked behind her ears, breathing like a trained spy. She didn't dare look up. "Don't make eye contact. Don't breathe too loud. Maybe he'll forget you exist." But then the door opened. Garrett Whitmore walked in, this time in a dark, tailored suit, a stark contrast to the hoodie from earlier. He looked every bit the CEO now, sharp, calm, intimidating. He gave a polite nod to the room. "Good morning." The execs returned the greeting. Elena didn't move. "Before we begin," Garrett continued, "I want to mention something from this morning." Elena's soul momentarily left her body. "This is it. The public execution. Goodbye, career." "I had an enlightening experience earlier today," Garrett said evenly. "One that reminded me of how important humility and patience are in leadership." The room nodded, serious. Elena gripped her leg to keep herself from jumping out the window. "But let's move on to the agenda." "Wait, what?" He wasn't going to say it? He was letting her live? She exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding loudly. Too loudly. Everyone turned to stare. Her eyes widened, and in a panic, she dropped her pen. She bent down to grab it, smacked her head on the table, and froze. Silence. Then came Garrett's unmistakable laugh again. "Miss Elena," he said, clearing his throat. "Care to share something with the group?" She looked up red-faced. "Just internal reflections." "Internal reflections?" "Yes. On the importance of humility in a corporate setting," she blurted. A pause. Then Garrett smiled. "Admirable." And just like that, the meeting continued while Elena prayed for a black hole to open beneath her chair. When the meeting ended, Elena practically sprinted out of the room. She needed to find a quiet corner to regroup, hide, or possibly change her identity. But she hadn't made it 5 steps before she heard the voice that now haunted her dreams. "Miss Elena." She froze. "Play dead. Maybe he's like a bear." Slowly, she turned. Garrett Whitmore stood there, hands in his pockets, watching her with the relaxed amusement of a man who knew he had total control over the situation. "Let's talk." "Talk?" she repeated, laughing nervously. "About what? Coffee protocol?" "No," he said, stepping closer. "About your new position." Elena blinked. "New position?" "You're going to be my personal assistant for the next week." It hit her like a freight train. "What?" "Think of it as a learning opportunity for both of us." She gawked at him. "What on earth could you learn from me? How to destroy a boardroom with a muffin?" Garrett grinned. "Well, you've already taught me the value of extra foam." "Mr. Whitmore, with all due respect, I'm very busy. I have spreadsheets to mess up, emails to misplace." "I already spoke with Mr. Miranda," he said smoothly. "Your responsibilities have been reassigned. As of this moment, you work for me." Elena opened her mouth, but words refused to form. Garrett stepped aside and gestured for her to follow. "Come on. You wouldn't want to be late on your first day, would you?" She stared after him like she was watching a slow-motion car crash. Then, with a deep breath and clenched fists, she followed. If she had to survive this, she was going to go down swinging. From that moment on, the worst first day of her life began. Garrett walked through Whitmore Global Solutions like royalty, commanding attention with every step, while Elena trailed behind him like a very confused duckling with a clipboard. "All right," he said, glancing back. "Your first task, take notes on everything I say." "That's easy," she replied, relieved. "I'm great at taking notes." He smirked. "Then start with this. I need a comprehensive list of strategic priorities for the next quarter, organized by department, complete with impact assessments and projected ROI." She blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "I talk fast," he said with a shrug. "You didn't get that?" She turned a page on her clipboard and scribbled one word in the center, survive. He tilted his head. "That your analysis?" "Yes," she said, deadpan. Promising start." He turned and kept walking. Elena muttered under her breath, "Lord, give me strength," before jogging after him. The first true disaster of the day struck in the conference room. Elena had one task, bring the right documents for Garrett's presentation. She double-checked everything for 20 minutes before stepping in, feeling cautiously confident. But as Garrett began to speak, he picked up the top sheet from the folder and paused. "Elena," he said, holding up the paper, "why is there a pizza flyer in this stack?" Her soul left her body. "What?" He flipped the paper around. "Liso's Pizzeria, best in Rivermont. 2-for-1 pepperoni special." The room went completely still. The finance director stared at the table. The marketing head coughed to mask a laugh. Garrett raised an eyebrow. "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but pizza discounts aren't currently part of our corporate expansion strategy." I must have mixed them up at home," Elena stammered, frantically flipping through the stack and sending sheets flying like a paper tornado. Finally, she found the correct documents. Garrett took them, scanned quickly, and continued the presentation as if nothing had happened. Elena, however, wished she could spontaneously combust. The intern beside her whispered, "Just curious, mozzarella or 4 cheese?" She threw a pen at him. Later, in a rare moment of calm, she saw a chance for redemption. After the presentation, Garrett asked for coffee the proper way this time. Determined to prove herself, Elena marched into the break room like a woman on a mission. She checked everything: the beans, the machine, the foam, the temperature. She even added a delicate dash of cinnamon for flavor. She presented the cup to him with a triumphant smile. "Here you go, Mr. Whitmore. Foam is perfect, temp is ideal. I even enhanced the flavor a little." Garrett took a sip, paused, then slowly frowned. "Interesting." Elena beamed. "Best coffee you've ever had, right?" He held up the cup. "Actually, this is green tea." Her world shattered. "What?" She snatched the container and looked inside. "Wrong powder." "But I triple-checked everything." Garrett swirled the tea. "Were you checking the spiritual alignment of the ingredients?" "I'm officially the worst assistant in the Western Hemisphere," she groaned. He smirked. "I'm not arguing. You're supposed to say that's not true," she snapped. "Relax, Elena. I like tea." She crossed her arms. "I bet if I brought you pickle juice, you'd say it was refreshing." He leaned back. "Depends. Would it come with extra foam?" She glared at him. He winked. The third catastrophe of the day unfolded right at Garrett's desk. Elena was organizing a few files carefully for once, trying to regain a sliver of dignity. But as she reached for a folder, her elbow bumped into a picture frame. It wobbled. In her attempt to save it, she knocked over a vase. Then a coffee mug. Then a glass plaque that read CEO of the Year. Everything moved in slow motion. Elena dove and barely caught the picture frame. But the vase? Smashed. The silence that followed was deafening. She slowly looked up, expecting Garrett to explode. Instead, he looked like he was biting his tongue to stop from laughing. "I can explain," she blurted. He crossed his arms. "Please do." "It was a test." "A test?" "Yes. To see how calm and patient you are in the face of extreme, assistant-related accidents." Garrett blinked. "And you passed. Congratulations." He narrowed his eyes. "I'm beginning to think your whole existence is just one long test." "I wouldn't do that intentionally," she said with a nervous smile. "Wouldn't you?" Elena laughed awkwardly. "I swear, I've never had a day like this in my life." "I have a feeling," he said, glancing at the broken vase, "this might just be day one." And just when she thought the universe had finished toying with her, Garrett added, "You're coming to the company gala tonight." She blinked. "What gala?" "Tonight. It's at Velvet Ivy, the new venue downtown. You're coming with me." Elena nearly tripped over her own shoes. "Me? Why me?" "Because you're my assistant. I just started today." He smiled. "Exactly. Let's see what other surprises you've got up your sleeve." "I don't know anything about corporate galas." "That's what makes it interesting." Before she could protest, he walked away. A shiver ran down her spine. He was definitely enjoying this way too much. After work, Elena rushed home and threw open her closet with the urgency of someone defusing a bomb. There was nothing remotely suitable for a high-end gala. After tearing through hangers and debating whether she could get away with a blazer and jeans, she couldn't. She settled on the only semi-formal thing she owned. A knee-length blue dress she had worn to her cousin's wedding 2 years ago. And white sneakers. It would have to do. But the moment she arrived at Velvet Ivy, her heart dropped. The place was a palace, crystal chandeliers, velvet walls, ambient lighting that made everything shimmer like a dream. Every woman was draped in silk, velvet, or designer couture. Heels clicked elegantly across the marble floor. And there was Elena, in sneakers. She considered turning around and running straight into traffic. But then Garrett appeared beside her. "Nice footwear," he said dryly, lips twitching. She groaned. "I'm a walking disaster." "No," he replied, glancing at her with amusement. "You're live entertainment." She exhaled sharply. "Remind me again why you brought me here?" "Because I wasn't sure whether you'd cause chaos. Or a full-blown crisis." "And what's the verdict?" He grinned. "Jury's still out." Classical music began to play. Guests moved gracefully to the dance floor like they'd been born in ballrooms. Elena took one step back. "I'm staying right here. In the shadows. Hidden behind this perfectly trimmed plant." Garrett wasn't having it. "Do you dance?" She snorted. "I tripped over my own shadow this morning." "You decide." "Perfect," he said, taking her hand. "Garrett, no, wait." Too late. He had already pulled her onto the dance floor. Within seconds, Elena stepped on his foot. Ow. Sorry. I warned you. He gritted his teeth and tried again, but she stepped on his other foot. My God, are you trying to assassinate me? I told you this was a terrible idea. Around them, guests started chuckling softly. Some were clearly enjoying the spectacle. Are they dancing or fighting? Someone whispered. I think it's interpretive chaos, another replied. Elena huffed. Let's leave before I break your leg. Garrett barely held back laughter as he led her off the dance floor. Elena's plan to stay out of trouble lasted exactly 5 minutes. As they walked through the grand ballroom, a waiter carrying a tray of champagne flutes passed by. Naturally, she bumped into him. The glasses flew. She reached out to stop the disaster, but somehow made it worse. The tray tilted, glasses crashed to the floor, and the sound echoed like a dramatic drumroll. 10 seconds of stunned silence. Then, wow, that was spectacular, someone exclaimed. Laughter rippled through the room. A few guests even clapped. That's the 3rd tray this year, another guest shouted. Elena stood frozen in place, mortified. Garrett, meanwhile, looked completely unbothered. You've officially turned a dull event into a headline act, he said, sipping his drink. I'm going to leave here in handcuffs. If you do, at least it'll be for entertainment purposes. She narrowed her eyes at him. You enjoy chaos, don't you? He raised an eyebrow. I'm starting to think it might be fun to have someone unpredictable around. Before she could come up with a sarcastic response, the microphone screeched overhead and the MC announced, Ladies and gentlemen, please raise your glasses for the toast. Elena grabbed a new glass very carefully and raised it along with the crowd. What could possibly go wrong with a simple toast? She took a sip and choked. The toast screeched to a halt. Everyone turned to stare as she coughed violently. Garrett closed his eyes and muttered, There's really no saving you, is there? Elena cleared her throat, set the glass down, and crossed her arms. But I'm your assistant now, so technically, your problem. He laughed. Loudly. And for the first time that evening, she didn't feel like a total failure. The next morning, Elena tiptoed into the Whitmore Global office like a fugitive entering a courtroom. Head down. Walk fast. Blend in with the furniture if necessary. Her strategy crumbled instantly. Good morning, glassbreaker. She groaned. Garrett was leaning against his office doorframe, coffee cup in hand, looking entirely too smug. Good morning, billionaire who feeds off my humiliation. He raised a brow. Sleep well? Oh, absolutely. Nothing like falling asleep knowing I've become an internet meme. Don't exaggerate. I've seen worse. Like what? Well, he said, sipping his coffee, once a visiting executive locked himself in a supply closet for 3 hours. We slid a bottle of water under the door. She stared at him. You're evil. I'm pragmatic. Same thing. He grinned. Come on, Elena. We've got plenty of chaos to get through today. Surprisingly, the morning started smoothly for her standards at least. No spilled coffee, no flying muffins, and she even remembered the name of one of Garrett's investors. Things were looking up. Until lunchtime. Garrett had a meeting with a foreign investor and decided to take Elena along to a high-end sushi restaurant downtown. Elena, this is Mr. Tiada, our partner from Japan, he introduced. She smiled, extended her hand. Nice to meet you, Mr. Tiada responded in fluent Japanese. Elena smiled politely and nodded. Absolutely. Garrett tilted his head. Did you understand him? Not a word. And you still answered? I'm skilled that way. He chuckled and gestured for them to sit. Determined not to mess up, Elena kept quiet, smiling at appropriate moments. But then it happened. She tried to cut a piece of salmon. The knife slipped. It flew straight toward Garrett. He dodged by instinct, and the knife landed perfectly on Mr. Tiada's plate. Elena froze. Mr. Tiada stared at the knife. Then he laughed. He said something in Japanese. Garrett translated. He says he's never seen a business meeting start with a ninja attack. Elena buried her face in her hands. Tell him it was an accident. Garrett relayed the message. Mr. Tiada just laughed again and waved it off. Relieved, she sighed. Well, at least no one got hurt. Then she took a sip of juice. And choked. Again. The waiter rushed over. Miss, are you okay? She waved, coughing. Mr. Tiada leaned in and spoke to Garrett again. Garrett smiled. He's offering you some tea. She shot him a glare. If it's like the tea I made you, I'll take my chances choking. Mr. Tiada didn't get the joke, but he laughed anyway. As they exited the restaurant, Elena let out an exhausted sigh. Why am I like this? Like what? Garrett asked, slipping his hands into his pockets. A walking disaster. He glanced at her sideways. You might not see it, but I think your personal chaos is oddly charming. She narrowed her eyes. Was that a compliment? Depends. If I say yes, are you going to throw another knife at me? She huffed but couldn't help the twitch of a smile. Just then, she noticed a group of photographers across the street. What's going on? She asked, slowing her pace. Garrett's jaw tightened. Great. Problem? Apparently, my ex-fiancée Charlotte made an appearance at last night's gala. The press thinks I was there with her. Elena's eyes widened. Wait, you have an ex-fiancée? Long story, he muttered. And how are you planning to dodge the paparazzi? Easy, he said with a mischievous glint. You're going to help me. Her stomach dropped. I don't like the sound of that. Pretend we're a couple. She froze. I'm sorry, what? He shrugged. If they think I'm seeing someone new, they'll stop chasing Charlotte-related drama. She shook her head rapidly. Nope. Absolutely not. I can't fake that. You fake being a good assistant every day. Excuse me. Before she could protest further, Garrett took her hand in his and intertwined their fingers. A jolt of something entirely unwelcome zipped up her spine. What are you, But he had already wrapped an arm around her waist and turned toward the flashing cameras. Just smile, Elena, he whispered. I swear, if I smile any harder, my face will break. You're terrible at pretending. And you're enjoying this way too much. The chaos had only just begun. Within seconds, photographers started yelling. Mr. Whitmore, is this your new girlfriend? How long have you two been dating? Is this serious? Elena panicked. Garrett just kept smiling like a seasoned actor. This is how I die, she thought. She tried to look casual. Failed. Then tripped. Of course. Garrett caught her by the waist mid-fall, which only made the scene look more romantic. The flashes exploded around them. My God, you make everything more complicated, he whispered through clenched teeth. Blame gravity. After a few minutes of camera flashes and shouted questions, Garrett finally steered her inside the building. Elena yanked her hand away the second the door closed behind them. Are you out of your mind? He grinned. Worked, didn't it? They're not asking about Charlotte anymore. She glared at him. No, now they're going to spend the week speculating about me. He shrugged. Could be worse. Oh really? Because from where I'm standing, this is top 3 on my biggest life disasters list. Garrett tried to keep a straight face. What's number 1? The day I asked for a raise and knocked myself unconscious on my boss's desk. He chuckled. You know, Elena, I'm starting to believe the universe sent you just to keep my life interesting. She rolled her eyes. Great. Can I go back to my boring life now? About that, he said, scratching the back of his neck. She didn't like his tone. What now? Garrett hesitated just long enough to make her nervous. The press reaction was strong. It might take a while for this rumor to die down. She crossed her arms. Define a while? A few weeks. Maybe a month. Her mouth fell open. You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend for a month? Technically, yes. Look on the bright side. You won't have to buy your own coffee. I can't believe you think that's a benefit. All right, he added, raising an eyebrow. I can offer a small bonus. She narrowed her eyes. How small? Let's say. Enough to make you consider it. Elena bit her lip. She hated how tempting that sounded. Her rent was due. Her fridge was empty. Her bank app cried every time she opened it. And how long exactly? She asked. 3, maybe 4 weeks. Could be less. Or more. Depends. She covered her face. This isn't real. This can't be real. It's very real. And you're just about to say yes. She dropped her hands and gave him the most exhausted look known to man. Garrett Whitmore. You have a special talent for turning my life upside down. He grinned. Right back at you, Elena. She sighed. If I end up in court for emotional fraud, you're paying my bail. Deal. And just like that, Elena signed up for the craziest month of her life. The next day, the office was buzzing. Wherever she went, people whispered, side-eyed her, then tried to act normal. It was like being the main character in a rom-com, written by someone with a chaotic sense of humor. But the real plot twist arrived at 10:02 a.m. Charlotte, Garrett's ex-fiancée. She stormed into the lobby like a designer hurricane, oversized sunglasses, expensive heels, and enough attitude to fuel a soap opera. Where's he? She demanded. Every employee froze. Elena tried to hide behind a printer. It didn't work. Charlotte spotted her instantly. Slowly, the sunglasses came off, revealing piercing green eyes. You're the girl from the photos, she said. Elena forced a tight smile. Haha, yeah, about that, eh? Before she could come up with a clever excuse, Garrett appeared. Charlotte, he said coolly. What a surprise. Charlotte crossed her arms. So it's true? You replaced a diamond with a pebble? Elena gasped. Excuse me. Did you say something? Charlotte asked sweetly. No. Nothing at all, Elena muttered through clenched teeth. Garrett stepped between them. Yes, Charlotte. I'm with Elena now. And I expect you to respect that. Charlotte tilted her head. It all seems so staged. Elena's stomach turned. But before she could panic too hard, Garrett did something completely unexpected. He cupped her face and kissed her. Right there. In front of the entire office. And just like that, Elena's brain exploded. The world around Elena vanished. She didn't hear the whispers. Didn't see the shocked expressions. Couldn't even feel the floor beneath her. Because Garrett Whitmore, Billionaire CEO, had just kissed her. In front of everyone. And worse? She didn't hate it. When he pulled away, still holding her gaze, he asked Charlotte with perfect calm. Still think it's fake? Charlotte's jaw tightened. Her cheeks flushed an angry red. This isn't over. And with that, she turned on her heel and stormed out, heels clicking like gunshots on the tile floor. Garrett looked pleased. Elena, however, was frozen in place, her mind racing like a glitchy computer. Finally, she blinked. Then smacked his arm. You kissed me. You played along beautifully, he said with a casual smile. You're going to pay for this. I already am, he said smoothly and quite generously, I might add. She growled under her breath. And just like that, the fake relationship was no longer a behind-the-scenes arrangement. It had gone public. Very public. Elena barely had time to process it all. She was still reeling from the kiss when her phone buzzed, 14 notifications from friends, coworkers, and even her landlord. She had gone viral. By lunchtime, tabloids were running headlines like, Mystery Blonde melts cold-hearted CEO's ice armor. Garrett Whitmore's new flame, who is she? Elena, romance or ruse? I'm going to be eaten alive, Elena muttered. She found Garrett lounging in his office, spinning slightly in his leather chair like none of this was unusual. You owe me hazard pay. He raised an eyebrow. How much? I don't know, she snapped. How do you price public humiliation? Before he could answer, his phone rang. He answered, listened, then sighed. Looks like Charlotte wants dinner. Elena choked on air. Dinner? She wants to meet. She doesn't believe the relationship is real. Oh, I refuse. You already refused once and look where we are. She crossed her arms. You're a manipulative devil. And you're surprisingly good at being my fake girlfriend. She narrowed her eyes. I want another bonus. He nodded. Done. She sighed. You're lucky I need groceries. He smirked. And I pay well. The plan was insane. The nerves were real. Elena spent the entire afternoon dreading the dinner with Garrett's ex-fiancée and her perfectly sculpted new boyfriend. At 6 p.m. sharp, Garrett showed up at her apartment with an elegant black car and a casual, ready for round two? She glared at him. I'm still recovering from round one. But she got in anyway. They drove straight to Maison Aurelia, one of Rivermont's most exclusive restaurants, the kind of place where even the bread had its own Instagram account. I'm underdressed again, aren't I? She asked, eyeing her simple dark red dress. You look stunning, he replied, then added, and don't worry, I made sure it wasn't a ball gown-only venue. She snorted. How thoughtful. Inside, Charlotte was already seated, dressed in something that probably cost more than Elena's rent, with her new boyfriend, Gustavo, who looked like he walked out of a fashion editorial. Sculpted cheekbones, tailored suit, silent judgment. As Elena and Garrett sat down, Charlotte's eyes locked on Elena like a heat-seeking missile. Red suits you, she said flatly. Thanks, Elena replied with a polite smile. You also exist. Garrett nearly choked on his water. Charlotte didn't blink. So, how long have you two been together? Garrett took Elena's hand and smiled. A few weeks. But it feels like years, doesn't it, sweetheart? Elena gave him a look that could have melted steel. Yes. Time really flies when you're confused. Gustavo raised an eyebrow. And you met, how? She mistook me for a barista, Garrett said, smirking. Twice, Elena added through clenched teeth. The waiter appeared just in time to save her from further questions. She panicked and blurted out the first dish on the menu. I'll have the escargot. Charlotte raised an eyebrow. Didn't expect that. Elena smiled weakly. Great. I just ordered snails. When the dish arrived, she stared at it like it had personally offended her. Charlotte smirked. Please, don't let us stop you. Elena picked up her fork with trembling hands, but before she could stab anything, Garrett leaned in. Actually, he told the waiter, she's more of a seafood fan. Could we swap this for grilled salmon? The waiter nodded and whisked the plate away. Charlotte narrowed her eyes. Always protecting her, aren't you? Garrett smiled. Always. Dinner finally ended and Elena had never been more grateful to leave a building in her life. As they got into the car, she folded her arms and stared at Garrett. If you ever make me go through that again, I want a raise. He chuckled. I was expecting that. She narrowed her eyes. I swear you enjoy watching me suffer. He smirked without looking away from the road. Maybe a little. Elena leaned her head against the window and sighed. This whole mess was far from over. The next morning, she woke up with one crystal-clear realization: she needed her life to return to normal. Immediately. No more fake relationships. No more investors. No more ex-fiancés. But when she picked up her phone, reality hit like a truck. #Valrit was trending. Her name was all over social media. Headlines flooded the news. Garrett Whitmore's mystery blonde takes over Rivermont. Office romance or PR stunt? Who is Elena Lewis? She nearly screamed. Elena. Sophia, her best friend and coworker, poked her head into her office. You're famous. I'm a disaster. No, you're a celebrity disaster. Before Elena could respond, her phone rang again. She picked up without checking the caller ID. If this is another nightmare, please let me sleep forever. Good morning to you too, Garrett said cheerfully. She groaned. It's too early for your CEO energy. I have news. She winced. There's always news. We're going on a business trip tomorrow. 3 days. Private investor conference. Excuse me, what? It's being held on my family's private island. Of course it is. I need you there. Elena let out a long, dramatic sigh. Why not take someone qualified? Like Wolfgang from accounting. He's efficient, organized, fluent in 4 languages. I need my girlfriend, not my analyst. This lie is spiraling out of control. We're managing it just fine. No. You're managing it. I'm just over here choking on juice and stabbing sushi. Exactly. You're unforgettable. Garrett, do I really have to go? Check your contract. There's a clause about surprise travel. She let out an exasperated groan. I hate you. See you tomorrow at 7. He hung up. Elena stared at the ceiling. This is not going to end well. The next morning came too fast. Elena was still trying to mentally process the fact that she was flying to a billionaire's private island when a sleek black car pulled up in front of her building. The driver opened the door and there he was. Garrett Whitmore. Perfectly dressed, calm as ever, with a travel bag slung casually over his shoulder. Ready for your international debut? He asked. She slid into the seat with a groan. I'm not a movie star, Garrett. I'm the unpaid comic relief in your life. The world disagrees. Have you seen the headlines? If you laugh, I swear I'll put superglue on your chair. He chuckled but didn't deny it. When they boarded his private jet, Elena nearly turned around and ran. The plane was bigger than her entire apartment. Leather seats, personal chef, even mood lighting. So this is how billionaires travel, she muttered. You get used to it. The pilot greeted me by name. I didn't even say anything. I told him you're part of my team. That's the most terrifying sentence I've heard all week. After a few hours of flying, they landed on Isla Celeste, Garrett's family-owned private island that looked like something out of a travel magazine. White sand, turquoise water, and a resort so luxurious, Elena was afraid to breathe on the furniture. As they walked into the open-air lobby, Garrett checked his phone and frowned. There's a small complication. She groaned. No. No more complications. He rubbed the back of his neck. Only one suite was available. Her eyes widened in horror. We're sharing a room? Technically, yes. I need a moment. She turned away, stared into the ocean, counted to 5, then turned back. Okay. As long as I get my own bed, we're fine. Garrett smirked. Of course. I'm a gentleman. Debatable. When they reached the suite, Elena stopped in her tracks. It was massive. Bigger than her childhood home. Marble bathroom, private terrace, and one giant bed plus a velvet couch. She pointed. That? Couch? Mine. He raised his hands. Fine. You win. I always win when furniture's involved. That evening, the first conference event kicked off with a beachfront gala under string lights and stars. Elena grabbed a glass of champagne and stared out at the ocean. You nervous? Garrett asked, appearing beside her. Terrified. He took her hand gently. Just smile and look like you adore me. She raised an eyebrow. Hardest assignment yet. He grinned. More fun than spreadsheets? She couldn't help but laugh. Sadly. Yes. The evening went surprisingly well at first. Elena managed to avoid spilling anything, tripping, or stabbing foreign investors. But then Garrett made that suggestion. Let's dance. She froze. Do you remember the last time I danced? I nearly dislocated your toes. This time I'll lead. You just follow. Famous last words. He didn't give her a chance to argue. One moment she was holding a glass of champagne. The next, she was on the dance floor with his hands on her waist. To her utter shock, she didn't step on him. Not once. They moved together effortlessly, and for a brief moment the gala, the cameras, the lies, all of it disappeared. She looked up at him, his expression softer than usual. Her heart skipped. He leaned in slightly, voice low. This is starting to feel real, isn't it? She blinked. What? He didn't answer, just kept looking at her like she was the only person in the world. Her mind screamed. It's all pretend. It's all an act. But her heart whispered, what if it's not? Before she could unravel the confusion inside her, an investor approached, smiling broadly. Mr. Whitmore, pleasure. And is this your lovely girlfriend? Garrett slid an arm around her waist. That's right. This is Elena. The man nodded with interest. And how did you two meet? Elena felt panic flare, but Garrett didn't miss a beat. She mistook me for a barista. The investor laughed. That's one way to start a love story. Garrett glanced at her, eyes sparkling. Something like that. Elena smiled weakly, then elbowed him the second the man turned away. Something like that? Really? Are you trying to give me a heart attack? You looked nervous. I was nervous. He leaned in, grinning. Interesting. Stop smiling like that. Like what? Like you're winning something. He laughed. She huffed and marched away toward the bar. He watched her go, still smiling. The next morning at breakfast, something was off. For the first time since she met him, Garrett was quiet. Too quiet. No teasing. No smug comments. Just him staring into his coffee cup like it held the secrets of the universe. Elena tilted her head. Okay. Who are you and what have you done with the annoying billionaire? He blinked. What? You haven't insulted my outfit or compared me to a disaster movie in over 10 minutes. Are you dying? He smiled slightly. No. Just thinking. She squinted. About what? He hesitated, then looked up. You. Her heart did a weird flip. Excuse me. He shrugged. In the past week, you've become my assistant, my fake girlfriend, started an accidental press frenzy, almost assassinated an investor, and somehow made me laugh more than anyone has in years. She stared at him, unsure how to respond. Thank you? He leaned back. I think I want to test something. What kind of test? Because if it involves seafood or high heels, I'm out. He reached across the table and took her hand. Do you trust me? Her breath caught. The real question is, should I? He didn't let go. Just trust me. And for some reason, she did. That evening, Garrett took her on a surprise dinner. Elena had expected another formal gala or investor soiree. Instead, they arrived on a private beach. A table for two. Soft string lights. The sound of waves. No photographers. No press. No scripts. What is this? She asked softly. A bet. On what? He pulled out her chair with a smile. If you don't admit by the end of this night that you liked it, I'll double your bonus. She narrowed her eyes. You're trying to buy my heart. Not buy. Convince. She rolled her eyes, but sat down anyway. And surprisingly, she enjoyed it. They laughed, shared stories, made fun of each other like old friends. And when the food came, she didn't even drop a single thing. As the evening wound down, Garrett kicked off his shoes and walked along the shoreline. Elena followed, heels in hand, dress swaying with the ocean breeze. You're seriously walking barefoot on your own island, she teased. Maybe you're changing me, he said. Her heart fluttered. They walked in silence for a while until he gently reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. He turned to her, voice low. You feel it too, don't you? She opened her mouth to deny it. But she couldn't. Because it would have been a lie. Then he kissed her. And this time there were no cameras. No Charlotte. No pretending. Just them. Elena didn't sleep that night. After the kiss, neither of them said much. Garrett walked her back to the suite, wished her good night, and true to his word, took the couch. And she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what on earth just happened. Because the worst part? She wanted it to be real. The next morning, they sat together at breakfast again. This time, it was Elena who stayed quiet. Garrett looked at her across the table. I know you're confused. Understatement of the year. He nodded. So let's make a deal. No more contracts. No more pretending. Let's see where this goes. She blinked. You mean, for real? Yes. You and me. Her heart pounded. This isn't another PR stunt? He shook his head. Not this time. She stared at him for a long second. Then smiled slowly. You're going to regret this. I doubt it, he said, reaching for her hand. And just like that, Elena decided to stop worrying about what was real and what wasn't and simply let it happen. For the next few days, they escaped everything. No journalists. No phone calls. No business. Just the two of them on Isla Celeste, swimming in the clear blue water, eating fresh fruit for breakfast and laughing until their stomachs hurt. And somewhere between stargazing on the balcony and racing barefoot on the beach, Elena fell in love. Not the panicked, clumsy kind of love she was used to. The quiet kind. The kind that made her feel like the world finally made sense. But of course, reality was waiting. The moment they returned to Rivermont, the press was there. Dozens of cameras. Reporters shouting questions. And standing right in the middle of the chaos was Charlotte. Elena's chest tightened. Charlotte stood tall, arms crossed, designer coat fluttering in the wind, expression sharp as glass. Welcome back. Garrett groaned. Charlotte, what do you want? She smirked and looked at Elena. I just want to know how long this little story is going to last. Elena frowned. Excuse me. Charlotte looked her straight in the eye. You still haven't figured it out, have you? He never loses. Then she turned to Garrett, waiting, daring him to say something. But he said nothing. And in that moment, Elena felt her entire world tilt sideways. Was it all just another move? Another game? She didn't wait for an explanation. She stepped back, turned, and walked away without looking back. Elena didn't stop walking until her legs gave out. She didn't know where she was going, she just knew she needed to be anywhere but near Garrett Whitmore. Her heart was pounding. Her thoughts a mess. Was it all a game? Was Charlotte right? Had she fallen for someone who was just playing a part better than she could? Eventually, she found herself in a quiet little cafe downtown, sitting alone at a corner table, staring blankly at the untouched tea in front of her. Her phone buzzed. It was Garrett. She didn't answer. It buzzed again. This time a message. Please. Just meet me. Let me explain. She locked the screen and shoved the phone into her purse. No. He had his chance. In front of Charlotte. In front of everyone. And he said nothing. Across town, Garrett stood in his office, staring at the same unanswered messages. William, his assistant, stepped in. She's still not responding? Garrett tossed the phone onto the desk. No. What did you expect? Charlotte humiliated her and you let her. I froze, he muttered. I didn't know what to say. Then say it now. Before it really is too late. Garrett fell silent. Because the truth was he wasn't used to this. He wasn't used to feelings. He was used to negotiations, power plays, strategy. But Elena Lewis wasn't a strategy. She was something entirely different. And he had no idea how to fix what he'd just broken. Meanwhile, Elena tried to throw herself into work. Back at Whitmore Global, she returned to her old desk, avoided eye contact, and kept her headphones in. But the sparkle was gone. She barely laughed, barely ate, barely slept. And everyone around her noticed. You look like someone stole your dog, Sophia said over lunch. Thanks, Elena muttered. That's comforting. Sophia crossed her arms. You're heartbroken. I'm fine. You're lying. Elena stirred her coffee. I thought he liked me. Have you given him a chance to say that? He could have said it in front of Charlotte. He didn't. Or maybe he froze. Just like you did when he kissed you the first time. Remember? Elena sighed. It doesn't matter anymore. But the ache in her chest told a different story. 3 days later, something unexpected arrived at Elena's desk. A sleek black box with a silver ribbon. Inside, a breathtaking emerald green dress. And a note in Garrett's handwriting. Vista March. Tonight, 8 p.m. I need you to hear me. Gee. She stared at it for a long time. Her first instinct? Toss it. But something inside her whispered, go. That evening, Elena stood in front of Vista Mar, one of the most elegant rooftop restaurants in Rivermont. Her heels clicked softly against the marble as she stepped onto the candlelit terrace. Garrett was already there, dark suit, no tie, hands nervously fidgeting with his cufflinks. When he saw her, he stood. "Elena," he breathed. She sat down across from him, arms crossed. "Say what you need to say." He nodded slowly, then looked her straight in the eyes. "I've never been good with feelings. You know that." She said nothing. "But I need you to believe me when I say none of this was fake. Not for me." "Then why didn't you say something when Charlotte humiliated me?" "Because I was scared," he admitted. "For the first time in my life, I didn't have the right words. I didn't know how to stop her without making it worse." She looked away. He leaned forward. "Elena, from the moment you mistook me for a barista, my world flipped upside down. You made my life chaotic and unpredictable. And I've never wanted anything more." Tears stung her eyes. "What if it's too late?" she whispered. He reached for her hand. "You're still here? So it's not." She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Because in that moment, she knew she was exactly where she belonged. 2 weeks later, the most unexpected wedding Rivermont had ever seen took place. No castles. No $1,000 ice sculptures. Just a beach, a sunset, barefoot vows, and one slightly lopsided wedding cake Elena accidentally bumped into during the reception. "Look at that," Garrett said, laughing as the top layer slid sideways. "Now you're knocking over desserts instead of investors." She pinched his arm. "I'll knock you over next." "You already did," he said softly, pulling her closer. When it was time for the vows, Garrett took her hands and smiled. "I never thought the most important day of my life would begin with you yelling at me over a coffee order." The guests laughed. Elena raised an eyebrow. "That's your opening?" He grinned. "Yes. Because it was the best mistake you ever made." Then his voice softened. "You made me laugh again. You made me feel again. You showed me that love doesn't have to be flawless, it just has to be real." Tears slipped down her cheeks. Now it was her turn. "I never imagined my life would lead here. Especially not with the man I mistook for a barista and insulted before 9 a.m. Laughter rippled through the crowd. "But Garrett, you showed me that even the most chaotic love story can become the most beautiful." The priest smiled. "Garrett Whitmore, do you take Elena Lewis as your wife?" 1,000 times yes." "Elena, do you take Garrett as your husband?" She beamed. "I do." The guests erupted into applause as Garrett pulled her in and kissed her like the world had disappeared. And in that golden light of the setting sun, Elena realized she wasn't a disaster anymore. She was exactly where she was meant to be, in the arms of the man who turned her world upside down and made it hers.